Okay, we're going to make some struts with some plastic bottles. Hopefully everyone has been saving their polar bottles, the 1 liter bottles. This is going to make making these struts a lot easier if they're all the same. Okay, so let's remove a cap. Remember, we want to save these caps. We're going to be using those for our hubs, which we'll get to a little bit later. Other things you might need for this is something to cut the bottles with. That would be a sharp razor blade. Something else is the diagram that has the dimensions for the struts. I've sent this all to you, and you've seen this before from last year. It has our 3 sizes of struts, A, B, and C, as well as the diagram on how to make it. Now, one of the first things we want to do is take off the label from the bottle. So we'll, again, save the cap. Those are going to be important. We'll just make a really thin little slice down the bottle, just enough to cut the label. And these labels just kind of peel right off. And we'll just get rid of those. Okay, so this bottle is ready to cut. And where we want to cut is right at the bottom of the seam. You can see right there's a line there. And that's where we want to put our blade and cut off that bottom. So we just insert our blade and just roll the bottle, and it just comes right off. Okay, be careful you don't cut yourself at the very end. And we just pull off the last bit. Great. Now this is ready to insert with another bottle. Okay, I've got one I've cut, so I'm just going to pop this other guy in, slide it in, makes a nice snug fit. Okay, you can see that little seam that's being held. We'll talk about that later. Now, the first strut we're going to make is one of the A struts. That's the shortest one. What we're going to need for that are 3 bottles where the bottom has been cut off, and 1 bottle that the bottom has not been cut off. So we put 2 together first, where the bottoms have been cut off. The third one, the bottom is still there. We keep that on. Remember to remove the caps on all of these because we want to save those. Make a nice snug fit. The third one, the last one, we want to put on backwards so that we have a strut that has threads on either side. You can just pop this over the end of the last bottle there. Okay, it's pretty snug. We'll be tightening this up a little bit later. First we'll do a quick measurement. And you can see that this is probably a little bit long for the strut A. That's okay. It doesn't take much to just kind of snug these guys in, make them a little bit tighter, a little bit smaller. As I say, there's a little bit of room to play. And we take another measurement, and we're just about there. Excellent. Okay. So this is going to be our smallest strut, which I mentioned before, strut A. And well, if you're making these struts and you've been assigned to make certain ones, just make sure that you've labeled them so that when we start putting them all together, we know which one goes to where. Okay, this is a strut A, so I've labeled it strut A. Now, if we want to go to struts B and C, those are 5 bottles. Both B and C are 5 bottles. 4 bottles with the bottoms cut off, and 1 bottle with the bottom not cut off, and put together the same way, where you put 3 bottles together with the bottoms cut off, the 4th bottle with the bottom not cut off, and then you flip the bottle around so that you have threads on either side. So this is B. And again, you can kind of mush the bottles together to get them to fit pretty well. Strut C is a little bit longer than B. We can still use 5 bottles. We just loosen it up a little bit to get that extra, I think it's about 3/4 of an inch. And we can measure that. And we're going to be right on for strut C. Perfect. Okay, great. So we want to label those 2. Now, if you remember from last year, we need to have these bottles screw on to hubs that we're going to make. And those hubs are made of the caps. So that means the ends of the bottle, the ends of the struts, have to be able to rotate because we need to be able to screw them on, keeping the strut together. So those ends we're not going to do anything with. They're still really snug, but if we need to, we're going to be able to rotate them. But the middle, we want to get those connected together so this whole thing doesn't fall apart. So we're going to use a soldering iron to kind of weld the plastic together. If you guys all remember this, just got a soldering iron nice and hot, and all we need to do is just find those internal seams and just poke these through, melt it in. You get a nice little hole, and that actually melts the two bottles together. We're going to just go around and make 4 or 5 little holes, and that's going to make a nice solid seam that when that plastic dries after it's been melted, this is going to be pretty solid. So if we can give it a little twist, you can see that these guys are nice and snug. They're not going anywhere. So that's great. Okay, so now we're done the strut. Let's go on to hubs.